We are here today at the Center for Progressive Reforms, and you are one of the co-founders and currently the CEO. Can you tell me a little bit about what the center does?
Center, it's an independent think tank in Uzbekistan. It's one of its kind in Uzbekistan because we don't have so many independent think tanks in Uzbekistan. So what we do operate in the fields of socio-political development. We also have a sector dealing with economic development, poverty reduction. They also deal with energy and environment as well. So corporate social responsibility is also there. The third section in our center deals with regional cooperation because we do believe that many issues Uzbekistan is facing are very much closely related to our region, and we should have a common approach in addressing these kind of issues. So these are the three main areas, and of course we do have a media hub, a media sector that helps us to actually make an impact and convey what we are doing and what we are advocating for.
And we're right now in the media hub.
Yes, we are in the media.
It's quite an impressive setup.
Yeah, thank you.
And I've seen some of the videos that you've been posting online, and they're short, direct to the point, and quite informative.
Yeah. This is what our current people need. You know, this is what they want to see. So we are trying to catch up. We are trying to make as impactful materials as possible. Yeah.
And it does make a big difference. And I wanted to ask you, in terms of making a difference, why do you think tanks are so important? What is their purpose, and why do countries need them?
Well, they need them for different reasons, for different purposes. Well, I believe, you know, as a country, you cannot rely only on government to promote, to actually provide and develop different solutions to different existing challenges and issues. There's a huge civil society. So I believe think tanks, as a part of civil society, they also contribute to addressing different challenges and making people's lives much better. So in this regard, having an independent view, having solutions based on data, not on different sentiments, you know, not on emotions, but on real data-driven solutions. So I believe this is very important. Another thing I believe is advocacy. I believe this is also a major part of what think tanks do, because they need people to understand what's going on for example, in Uzbekistan, right? So it's acting as a kind of bridge, you know, between state and society, and trying to explain what's going on, where the country is heading to, and why certain solutions are there, why certain decisions have been made. And I believe the third reason is, again, a vice versa, which means that think tanks need to act as a kind of provider of people's opinion to the government. So it's very important for government to have independent overview of people's opinion, people's expectations, and existing challenges of different sectors, be it businesses, you know, and many other areas. So I believe this is also one of the major roles of think tanks here nowadays, especially in Uzbekistan, with all the dynamic reforms going on in Uzbekistan.
Yeah, the country is changing quite rapidly. I've seen big changes since I first came here in 2016 up until now. It's a completely different country.
Yes, you're right. Completely different country. So many different changes are going on in all sectors, you know, in all sectors. So sometimes it feels chaotic. Sometimes people, even experts, feel disoriented where the country is heading to. You know, sometimes you don't really understand why certain decisions have been made. But if you go deeper, you'll understand that, you know, the government is trying to make people's life better, and of course trying to address challenges, and challenges are everywhere, in all sectors, in all areas, in all regions of Uzbekistan. So wherever you go, you'll see that people want change. And wherever you go, you can see many challenges, issues, problems, and of course for this you need resources. Of course, in order to have resources, you need to have certain incomes, you know, so everything is so correlated nowadays.
Yeah, it's impossible to make one change without it impacting everything else.
Of course.
And for me, what's interesting is the name of your center. So it's the Center for Progressive Reforms. Why that emphasis on progressiveness?
Well, it's my brainchild. I always want to have progressive reforms in Uzbekistan.
Yeah.
So before my establishing of this think tank, I worked for the government for about 20 years. But wherever I worked, I was always in policy planning division. So I always had an aspiration to establish an independent think tank. You know, I worked in some Western countries, in Belgium, for example. I've seen so many think tanks. I always give an example. For example, in Washington, there were 5,000 different think tanks. And they are one of the major contributors to the development of a country and promotion of their policies inside and outside of country. So I always thought that it's a good idea to have that kind of independent think tank in Uzbekistan, first, and secondly, that it can really promote different progressive ideas, not in a sense that is established in Western countries nowadays. Progressive meaning is associated with over-progressive, I believe. So there is already a kind of culture against it, right? Against woke culture and others. But in Uzbekistan, when we say progressive, we mean developing a freer economy, becoming more democratic, strengthening institutions of legislative, executive, and of course judiciary. It's about addressing basic challenges and needs of people, of course. I believe this is progressive for Uzbekistan.
And for me, I've spoken to a few experts from various places, and they've all really pinpointed as Uzbekistan under President Shavkat Mirziyoyev has been the leader for the region in pushing that C5+1 format out there and getting, as you've said, that importance of trust between the nations. He's worked hard to rebuild that.
Definitely, role of president, you cannot really, overstate his role in this, in all of this. I was happy to work as a part of his team. I worked in the presidential administration, and I can tell you I have seen so much of energy. You really, I would say, insatiable need for progress. This is what he really wants to see here, inside the country and in the region as well. I always used to think of this person as, I would say, energizer. He not only committed to this, but he energized everyone, to achieve certain goals. I can openly tell you that there were many provocations even in this region between countries, among countries, to undermine all the integrational efforts as well. There are countries which were looking for reasons to be upset as well. There were provocations in the borders as well. There were sometimes opposition to different initiatives. There was a lack of understanding sometimes on the reasons why we need to, go further in our integration and cooperation. Nevertheless, we always went forward, and the president of Uzbekistan, Shavkat Mirziyoyev, has demonstrated a certain level of constraint when it comes to provocations, and patience when we didn't see the same level of enthusiasm,
Yes.
And it's always there. I always thought that, at some point it should end, If you keep on trying and you don't see results, at some point you get offended and say, if you don't want, okay,
Yes.
But no, there is a kind of will, and there is always push forward,
Tenacity.
Tenacity, yes. Consistency, I would say, So it's inspiring. This is what, for example, gives me personal strength to continue and to be optimistic,
Yeah.
Because I learned that, if you keep on trying, you'll reach your goal, I mean, if you see it in a way that there is no other alternative, he always says that there is no other alternative. We've seen other alternative. It didn't work.
Yes.
So this is the only option. This is the only way, and we should move forward. And this is what he personally believes and does, not because he wants to be liked. I mean, he has a certain level of popularity in Uzbekistan, conduct easy and difficult reforms as well. He has a certain level of international already recognition as well. So he's not doing it to be liked more or to gain more strength. He's doing it because of his personal beliefs. This is why we can see the genuine efforts in this regard.
Yeah, and we've seen it now in the acceleration of the negotiations for the WTO accession. They have 1 year left to finalize everything.
Yeah. Even experts don't believe that we can achieve that kind of result to become a member in 26. Yeah. But there is a very strong political will. There is a very strong understanding that we need to be part of the World Trade Organization, where 96% of all trade is being done.
Yes.
We should be part of that team, and we should play on the same based on the same rules as the other part of the world.
Uzbekistan's biggest trade partners are all already members of the WTO as well.
Yes, of course. We are happy to reach agreement now with the United States, with China. It's a little bit difficult to work with nowadays with Russia. Russia is a member of WTO, but it's proposing us to become first member of the Eurasian Economic Union.
Yes.
But I personally believe that we should become first members of WTO, and I see a political commitment and a political will that Uzbekistan should be first member of World Trade Organization, and then based on the commitments, obligations within that organization to establish maybe some other agreements with other countries as well.
Yeah, I think you are quite right. WTO first.
Yes.
Yeah, there's still so much to do.
Of course.
And in terms of the recommendations that you've given the government, and we can see some of the changes that have come about as a result. Most recently, the president announced that 2025 is going to be the year of green economy and green energy. What impact do you see a green economy having here in Uzbekistan, perhaps?
Well, I believe the choice of announcing next year as green economy, year of green economy, is not incidental. It was a highly calculated decision because on one hand, people are concerned with the environmental challenges. Uzbekistan's economy is growing, developing. Industry is developing. There are so many constructions going on all over, for example, city, right?
Yeah.
Tashkent city.
And we can feel it in the air quality as well.
We are seeing it feeling it in the air quality. A lot of people are concerned with all the things, the dust, the air quality. People are concerned with, for example, cutting off trees, even though there's moratorium, but we can see that, government sometimes cannot control everything because businesses are very active. They want more land, and sometimes it's it's a kind of catch-22. But government want more, to business to develop. At the same time, it wants to protect the environment. So it's a challenging, I believe, task. And of course, the other reason I believe is that our energy sector really needs a green solutions, because we are really in shortage of gas in Uzbekistan. The gas resources are being depleted, So in few years we'll see less and less gas. So just recently, government, I believe yesterday there was a meeting in the presidency about this, and president also was criticizing that the resources are depleting, and there is no much investment being done in explorations. So there are lots of efforts put in exploration, but still, the gas resources, I believe they're not abundant.
Yeah.
So we need to have different solutions. So nowadays, for example, the government is investing heavily in solar and wind
Yes.
power, right, generation. And we've seen so much capacity. Just recently, we had over 3,000 megawatts of solar and wind projects being launched.
18 new projects were recently launched.
Yes,
Yeah.
18 different new projects, and there will be more to come. So many companies, Mazda, Aqua Power, and others are building huge projects worth billions and billions of dollars. I would say even tens of billions of dollars. So this is, I believe, what Uzbekistan will focus on. Of course, when it comes to green energy, we also need to talk about increasing efficiency of use of electricity, for example. Right?
Yes.
It's a huge challenge in Uzbekistan because we can say even though this year the prices for electricity have gone up, but still it's cheap.
Yes.
Electricity is very cheap in Uzbekistan.
Gas as well.
Gas as well. Very cheap to the point that people don't feel really an urge or need to save it.
No.
So this is what we are here seeing in Uzbekistan, and one of the major goals of the government will be to increase the efficiency of use of electricity and gas, overall resources, energy resources in Uzbekistan.
I think another big problem is Uzbekistan's population is growing rapidly, almost exponentially. It's the biggest population in the region. What do we do with all the waste that is produced by everybody? Because as the city expands, it moves around those existing landfills. How do we handle that?
Yes, Uzbekistan is already looking into it. Just this year, there were several major contracts signed by with foreign companies and investors in really using those wastelands to produce energy, and at the same time to address the challenges of the growth of the wastelands and really to recycle the waste. It's a major. There are two major projects this year, and I believe there will be more to come in the coming years in Uzbekistan.
But changing mentality will take a long time.
Of course, it will take a long time, but we should nevertheless keep on doing it. We cannot stay still and say it takes a long time. We cannot do anything about it. No, we have to work, and we as Center for Progressive Reforms, as a think tank, we also trying to contribute. We are really working in raising awareness, in advocacy, in trying to promote that kind of culture here in Uzbekistan.
And that kind of brings us into that topic of gender-based violence. And I believe that's one of the first interactions we had together was at the UN Women event, where you presented the results of your survey. And I wanted to ask, in terms of, in Uzbekistan, it's something that is accepted as a norm here. A lot of women and families still see it as, that's the way it's supposed to be. I wasn't good enough at doing this job, so I need to be disciplined. That's or the kainanas or the mother-in-laws see it as their duty to educate their sons' wives in not the best way. How do you see, what more can we do to make people realize that this way of thinking is not the best, and the importance of mental health, not only for women, but for the men in the society? Because I believe that the men in Uzbekistan have been raised to be stoic, to only express certain emotions, and that has negatively impacted them.
Unfortunately, this is what we have. It's really deeply rooted, So it comes with different generations, It's a generational, I would say, curse, that this is what we have in Uzbekistan. The gender-based violence, domestic violence was seen for many years as something normal, condition, and everyone has seen it. The children, the parents, everyone thinks it's some kind of acceptable thing. Very much, unfortunately, but I believe things are changing. For the last 5-6 years, there were so many regulations adopted, laws adopted on domestic violence. For the first time, we have identified what violence means, right? It's not just physical violence. It's psychological violence. It's economic violence when you don't let your wife to work, for example, right? It's economic violence. So people are starting to open up and talk about it openly. And I already see positive results because based on our surveys, focus group discussions, people are starting to understand why it's not normal thing and what could be done and what should be done. I'm happy that the youth especially, they are very much aware of the challenge and they are looking at it differently.
I wanted to touch on, at the beginning you mentioned a focus on research in the region. And I've always thought that it would be a nice idea to have more of like a Schengen zone here in the region in terms of tourists or even residents being able to travel freely between the countries on just a single visa instead of having to renew that. Or having a common market in place and seeing the regional economy grow as opposed to just countries individually.
Yeah.
What kind of research have you done here at the center in terms of the regional challenges that are in place? Because water is the biggest one right now.
Well, water will remain always a challenge for many countries sharing same rivers, right?
Yes.
It's a huge challenge for everyone. In these regions, up to 2016, water was considered as one of the maybe reasons for even future wars.
Yes.
Here in this region. Fortunately, many challenges region is facing have been addressed. For example, I was working in the policy planning division in 2016, right, when we had the new government. We had so many challenges, but me being an optimistic person, really found it difficult to believe that we can address, for example, differences with Kyrgyzstan on water issues, on border issues, on trade, people-to-people contact. Everything was frozen. Everything was on the brink of war even, you know.
Yeah.
There were even people dying in the border. You know, it was really difficult, even being such an optimistic person, it was really difficult to fathom that this can be addressed. You know, we are seeing so much progress nowadays. For example, with Kyrgyzstan, we addressed all our issues. More, there are maybe some questions, but they are addressed on a kind of pragmatic way, on a, what we say, win-win culture. You know, it's good that we have established that kind of.
It's not a zero-sum game.
It's not a zero-sum game anymore with our neighboring countries. So we've passed a long way, and to the point that nowadays we don't need even passports to cross borders. Yeah. We can go to Kyrgyzstan with ID cards nowadays. And now we are working on reaching the same level of cooperation with our other neighbors like Tajikistan and Kazakhstan. We are planning to have that kind of facilitation on being able to cross border with internal ID cards, you know. So we are working in this regard. The trade, for example, thanks to, I believe, role of Uzbekistan actually, that internal trade in Central Asia have increased to 4.5 times for the past 7 years. You know,
that's quite substantial.
Yes, the number of joint ventures have increased fivefold, for example, here in this region. We are already working on different cooperation that you know, one product will be produced based on productions in different countries, you know, here in this region. So we are talking about chain of different plants and factories. So there is that kind of cooperation as well. We are already talking positively when it comes to building dams, for example. Before, for example, with Tajikistan, one of the major issues was Rogun Dam.
Yes.
It's a tallest dam if it's built in the world, like over 300 meters tall.
That's massive.
It's a massive. So government of Uzbekistan, people of Uzbekistan were afraid that once it's built, it can really cut water for many years, you know. And we will not have water when we need it, right? During springtime, during you know, when we need it most, during summertime when we need it most, and it will be used during winter times to generate electricity when they need electricity. So it was a huge challenge and Uzbekistan vehemently opposed it. The same with Kambarata in Kyrgyzstan as well. So nowadays we see it differently. We believe that we can use those dams, facilities, infrastructure jointly, so that our needs in water will be met and also our energy needs will be met. Because, for example, electricity produced in Tajikistan is one of the cheapest. We are buying it for almost, I think, 2 cents per kilowatt.
Oh, wow.
It's very cheap. So if they will generate more, it will be beneficial to Uzbekistan.
Yeah.
So the main issue was always a trust. So we already have that kind of level of trust when we are okay with them building dams and cooperating in water management. Of course, there are challenges with Afghanistan nowadays.
With Koshtepe Canal.
With Koshtepe Canal, yes. But we are working with Afghanistan, with the current government in Afghanistan as well, to convey them that there are better ways to address their water issues, that the technology should be different, the water usage should be different, and of course it's not okay that they take major chunk of water without discussing it.
Yes.
With downstream countries like being Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. There are certain regulations and laws. Of course, Afghanistan is not part of those kind of international treaties. It's not part of regional different agreements here in Central Asia. Partly it's because of us, because we didn't want Afghanistan to be part of different agreements on water sharing before.
Yes.
Now we are inviting them to become members of those agreements. I believe we can reach an agreement with Afghanistan as well. Of course, there are many political strains attached to it, but anyway, I believe we can address those things. Yet there are many, as you said, problems or challenges that we need to address in Central Asia. For example, it's, as you rightly mentioned, in Schengen zone you can cross without even knowing that you have crossed the border, right?
Yeah.
In a car without even stopping. Of course, it's changing in Europe as well because of illegal migration, but overall the spirit, is different. This is what we also want to see here in this region. And Uzbekistan is investing heavily in this. So, for example, this year there was a 6th consultative meeting of heads of states in August, and President was saying that it's time to create a free economic zone in Central Asia. It's time to think and start developing common market here in Central Asia. We are already talking about it. We are also talking about institutionalizing regional cooperation. We do have, as I said, consultative meetings of heads of states.
And the parliaments?
Well, yes, it started with heads of state. Now we have agreement on start launching that kind of meetings on a parliamentary level. Now we have also proposed to have ministerial meetings, different. We are already, Central Asian countries have appointed national coordinators for cooperation in Central Asia. So we are talking now about institutionalizing cooperation. I really hope that in the nearest future we'll start even thinking about creating institutions that will be above nations, above countries. So that, but it entails giving up certain level of sovereignty to those institutions, rights to decide. It's a huge a kind of leap, I would say, because it needs huge level of amount of trust.
Yes.
This is what we need to build nowadays. So as a center, we are working with our partners in neighboring countries also to develop that trust. We call it track to diplomacy, to work with different think tanks also to come up with certain solutions, to advocate for certain solutions and ideas in neighboring countries as well, to create, I would say, expectations in our neighboring nations that they also would want to see a kind of common political and economic area here in Central Asia. Of course, it's a long way, but we are working in this regard.
I look forward to seeing where it's going to go in the next few years.
Yes, I'm sure you will be happily surprised because these countries of the region have already surprised, and nowadays many experts all over the world see Central Asia as a kind of role model in addressing different, differences, and really, integrating and developing cooperation rather than establishing borders, reverting to protectionism, right?
Yes, like we saw before.
That we've seen before, and we are seeing all over the world nowadays, with all the sanctions and wars, conflicts, disruptions of traditional trade routes,
supply chains.
Supply chains, yes.
Yeah, protectionism is becoming the new popular word around the world.
Yes, unfortunately. Yeah.
Do you have any concluding remarks that you would like to say?
Well, first of all, I would like to thank you to come to our media hub and have this conversation. I hope we will be able sometime in the future to continue our interviews, our interactions. I'll be happy to share my ideas on what's going on in Uzbekistan, and of course to get certain maybe your views also on what else should we do. And I would also want to say that reforms are difficult.
Yes.
There are many people who don't understand what's going on in Uzbekistan, and hence they don't really support, changes. Changes are always scary.
Yes.
There are many people who are afraid to lose status quo. For example, those who are in power, those who may lose their level of influence if things change in Uzbekistan. But again, based on what I said earlier, we have no other option. We should go forward, and the reforms are the only option. And I believe progressive reforms should be the only option. And we'll be working hard in this regard to promote progressive reforms, to provide constructive solutions to existing problems, because our motto is that we are not a watchdog that just pinpoints on problems and criticizes.
Yes.
We provide solutions. This is our strength, and we work with everyone, with all stakeholders, governments, international organizations, civil society, NGOs, human rights organizations, and trying to build here that kind of constructive platform where everyone can share their ideas and work together. And we are happy to act as a bridge, and we'll continue our work in this regard.
And thank you for having us here with you as well, and for sharing your insights, and I'm sure we will engage again in the future.
Thank you for your interview time.